Start. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining today's webinar. I'm sure you're going to find it really useful and interesting. Just a couple of tech requests. Please keep yourself muted until we get to the question and answer session. Do write your name and affiliation into the chat so we know who we have here. And as you would have already heard, we are recording this session. My name is Shirley Tarawali. I'm chair of the organizer of today's webinar, the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, or GASL. I'm also Assistant Director General at the International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI, in Kenya. I'm sure, like me, many of you were either involved or following on various media channels the proceedings and the outcomes of the recent COP26 in Glasgow. Some of us participated in side events specifically focused on livestock issues as well. And there was a huge amount of traffic, a lot of information. And so we thought it would be really useful to help us think about what does this mean for a sustainable livestock sector, to have some kind of distillation of the key information with regard to livestock. And we're really fortunate today to have with us Walter Ollantaytamala, who is a member of the IPCC, former director of the Climate Change Unit of the Ministry of Agriculture in Uruguay. And he was also an official UNFCCC negotiator for Uruguay for over 10 years, actually. And he's a consultant at the moment for the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation in Agriculture on UNFCCC and Coronivia matters. And he's been very much involved with both GASL and one of the action networks, LEAP, on environment assessment. And Walter has taken on the heroic job of assembling this vast amount of information from COP26 to share with us today. And he's also going to share some thoughts on opportunities for the livestock dimensions to continue as part of the Coronivia process and in relation to events coming in the next few months. And of course, the next COP27, in Cairo later in 2022. So Walter's going to give us a presentation for probably around about 25 minutes to share that information. How he's got that into 25 minutes, let's see, but that's amazing. And then we'll have a Q&A session. You can post questions in the chat, and when we get to that moment, you will also be able to raise your hand and ask a question live as well. And we have Barbara and Lavinia online who are going to help us to manage that process. So that's enough from me, and let me hand over to Walter for the presentation. Walter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shirley. Good day to all the colleagues and friends that joined this webinar, in which the intention is to provide inputs to reflect on what this COP is as an opportunity for further involvement and contributions. So I will comment my understanding of the main outcomes, and I say my understanding because the COP is a very, very complex process where this time more than 40,000 people attended, and many issues are discussed in parallel. And well, one can try to summarize the main outcomes with a bias on agricultural implications. Secondly, I will update to you how much progress was there in the Coronivia Joint Work in Agriculture after 3 years from the start of this process. And finally, provide inputs for an exchange to identify the opportunities for involvement and contributions of the sustainable livestock sector stakeholders, such as GASL, in a year 2022 that will will very rich in this type of opportunities for contribution to agriculture, because the next COP27 is in Africa, and for Africa, agriculture is very much in the center of their goals in terms of achieving substantive progress in agriculture. So this COP will be, let's hope that it will be really important for agriculture. Well, you know, UNFCCC has an objective, and as this objective was established in 1992, many years ago, it is useful to refresh our memory on what is the purpose of this convention, one of the three conventions out of the summit in Rio. And well, the ultimate objective is to stabilize the greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. This means that greenhouse gases are in the center of the objective of the convention, but at the same time, the same Article 2 says that such a level should be achieved within a time frame sufficient to allow ecosystem to adapt and to ensure that food production is not threatened, and to enable economic development to proceed in a sustainable manner. So as you see from the very from the cradle of this convention, the link between greenhouse gases and food production was established in the heart of the convention. There was clear understanding that whatever we do with greenhouse gases to stabilize them in such a level will not mean a threat to food production. So it is very important to have this in mind. Second is that the convention has a set of principles that are described in the Article 3, related, for example, that parties should cooperate, and that measures to combat climate change should not constitute a means of arbitrary or unjustifiable discrimination or a disguised restriction on international trade. So there was also in that time a concern on the possibility that measures to combat climate change could be used as a means of interfering in trade without no justifiable reasons. The convention is very complex, and this is the idea. The idea is not to go box by box, but just to show that during these 30 years, the convention has been created different bodies. It has the Conference of the Parties as the main political body, but it also has two permanent bodies. One is the subsidiary body for scientific and technological assessment, and the other is the subsidiary body for implementation. These are the two permanent bodies, but a set of constituted bodies have been created for different roles and functions. Financial mechanisms have been created. So it's not quite simple nowadays, the structure and the chart of the UNFCCC convention. We may feel that the progress in the convention is not fast enough to go with the speed of in which climate change is progressing, and that we should go faster. And this is true, but at the same time, we have to be aware that all decisions at the COP are made by consensus. And all countries that are parties to the convention are represented in the COP. So to reach a consensus is not easy because countries have different perspectives or different positions or different interests. So building consensus is complicated, but at the same time, it's difficult to modify the rule of consensus because it would mean that there will be winners and losers, and well, this would also be complicated. So let's go now after this very fast introduction to COP26 and what could be mentioned as the main general outcomes. First is that this COP was really important in the amount of decisions. As you can see on the left of the screen, there were 23 COP decisions, 12 CMP decisions. What are CMP decisions? COP decisions related to the Kyoto Protocol, which is the instrument that will be replaced by or is being replaced by the Paris Agreement, but still some decisions have to be made. And 25 decisions of the CMA. The CMA is the COP acting as where the decisions related to the Paris Agreement are taken. It is useful to divide the COP26 in two parts. One of them was the formal negotiations, in which these were the main elements that were discussed simultaneously and that cover a wide range of topics. First of all, it was what the presidency by the UK called the Glasgow Climate Pact. That was a package with a delicate balance, trying to contemplate the different positions and the common ground. And after that, there was also negotiations related to finance, to Article 6, that is the article related to market and no-market mechanisms of the Paris Agreement, to loss and damage, to adaptation, transparency, common timeframes to report to the COP by countries, the global stock take, which will be undertaken in 2023 and will be the opportunity to say what we already know, that we are not on track to achieve the temperature target of the Paris Agreement, which is well below 2 degrees. Response measures, that are the measures that countries take to combat climate change, but that may have negative externalities to other countries. Gender action plan, action to empower climate action, and also Coronivia's joint work in agriculture. So these were the main topics of the convention, and it is really complicated when, for example, in my case, I focus my attention here in Coronivia, and at the same time, in parallel, there were all these discussions, and as usual, the devil is in the details, and it's very difficult to catch all the details that were involved during the 2 weeks of the negotiations. Beside these formal negotiations, there was a lot of things. There were a lot of things happening around the COP. Here in blue, you see a package of initiatives that were promoted by the presidency, by Mr. Sharma. Mr. Sharma, as the UK president of the COP, he promoted the Global Methane Pledge, the Deforestation Pledge, the coal phase out, which finally he could not achieve it, and was replaced by coal phase down in the last minute, and this produced a lot of disappointment in people attending, because, well, as you know, coal is one of the main sources of CO2 emissions, and the target was to phase out coal in 2030. Well, this affected the interest of several countries for whom coal is very important. So India, in the last minute, presented a proposal to change phase out for phase down. But behind India, there were also other countries as China, Australia, Russia, well, others. So it could not be fully achieved. Also, zero emissions cars, fossil fuels financing or subsidies that, as you know, are very relevant. More than 300, depending on the years, but more than $300,000 of $300 billion are allocated every year to subsidize extraction and distribution of fossil fuels. Financial analysis, the Glasgow breakthroughs, and finally, there was a joint USA and China climate declaration. Very important, as these two countries represent around 40% of all global emissions. And an initiative came also related to promoting renewable energies to go beyond oils and gas. So this is the big picture of the negotiations. And I will try to now explain something about some of these pledges. One of them is somehow related to livestock, is the pledge on reduction of methane by 30%. Well, this global methane pledge is joining countries to jointly reduce absolute methane emissions by 30% by 2030 compared to 2020. As we know, methane is has a short life in the atmosphere, around 12 years, but it has a lot of heat retaining power. Therefore, reducing it is very valuable in this critical decade, because as the IPCC points out, if we want to keep alive the possibility of maintaining temperature in the 1.5 level compared to the beginning of industrial era, then very important cuts in emissions have to be done from now to 2030, as much as 47% reduction in GHG emissions if you want to maintain alive the possibility of not surpassing the 1.5. So with the current NDCs to the Paris Agreement, the expectation is that emissions will not go down by 2030, but will grow some 14%. So telling countries that instead of going up by 14%, they should go down by 47% globally is really a huge challenge. And the IPCC says, well, methane is an opportunity. If we can reduce it a lot, the methane, then it can help to achieve this outcome of maintaining alive the 1.5 target. And also the IPCC said in the 1.5 special report of 2019 that there is a very important difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees more. The common sense will mislead us, because we may think, well, 1.5 or 2 is more or less the same, but it's not more or less the same. And every decimal of degree matters. This is very relevant conclusion from the IPCC. So here in the reduction of methane are very attractive low-hanging fruits. And these low-hanging fruits are not enteric fermentation methane, are related to fossil methane leaks associated with extraction and distribution of oil and natural gas. However, as we know, when people think of methane, what they see this. They don't see a well of extracting oil, natural gas, or coal from the earth. No, they see a cow. So here we have a problem, a communication problem. It doesn't, this focus on fossil methane, that doesn't mean that there is nothing to do in relation to livestock. I think livestock can contribute to the target, and we know that there are opportunities, for example, in manure management, in increasing the overall efficiency, in improving the quality diets, in certain additives. But it is unrealistic to think that maintaining the number of heads, we can reduce 30%. So it's important to keep in mind that this pledge refers to a global 30% by all countries that have adhered to this pledge, and that there's no specific requirement on any particular source. Nevertheless, the low-hanging fruits is the fossil methane. And we know that livestock emissions are important, and in some regions are even more important, so they are not evenly distributed around the world. For Latin America, it is a very important, has a very important share of global livestock emissions. And so it is important to find ways to improve the performance of the sector in terms of emissions intensity, net emissions, including carbon sequestration. But the focus of this pledge, as the International Energy explains well in a report from October 2021, is that it is possible to reduce by 2030 75% the emissions of this fossil methane, and most of it at negative cost, because as there are leaks, then this is a loss. And if we think that 75% of this 30% is around 23%, then the target of the 30% is not unrealistic. And there is left something like other 7% that may come from many different sources. For example, landfills, for example, livestock also, for example, rice. And so I thought it was important to give a context to this pledge in order not to see that it is pointed directly to the livestock sector. But communication may influence people to think that it is so, but it is not so. So this is something that we may need to better explain. Another pledge related to agriculture was zero deforestation by 2030. As we know, agriculture is an important driver of deforestation related to livestock, soybeans, oil palm, etc. And emissions from deforestation are significant. Around 15% of all GHG emissions come from deforestation. And another 4% comes from forest degradation. So some 20% is related to natural forest. We also know that zero deforestation was already promised at the COP20 in Lima in 2014, and it was not fulfilled. Just this is the truth. But this time, I think there is more commitment because there is money on the table. So some 14 billion of public and private support has been offered. So there is there are more reasons to be more optimistic on decreasing deforestation. Maybe not going to zero, but closer to that. Another initiative is what is called the Aim for Carbon, Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, launched by USA and the United Arab Emirates to promote faster and more transformative climate action in the agricultural sector. It's a global partnership that aims to accelerate investment and support for climate smart agriculture and food system innovation, paying attention to enhancing research and development at countries level. If you want more information on this, there is in this link, it was the side event in the COP where they presented this initiative. So, trying to make a general balance of the COP26. Was it an important COP? Yes, it was. Possible it was the most important COP in terms of outcomes since the Paris Agreement COP in Paris in 2015. It's very important to underline that the message of science was heard, that we need to keep alive the possibility of limiting warming to 1.5, and that every 1/10 of a degree matters. This is, in my view, this is new, and this is very important. In addition, and beyond the every 5-year global stock take of the Paris Agreement, the first will be in 2023, the climate pact promoted by the UK presidency requires parties to present more ambitious targets as early as the next COP27. So this is the ambition that was not presented in COP26 is expected to be presented in COP27. Parties are expected to go to COP27 with more ambitious targets. There was also an acceptance by developed parties that the global financing goal of $100 billion per year from 2020 has not been met, and we are far from that. But there is a commitment to meet this target in 2023. There was also a decision to double the funds for adaptation because most of the money was going for mitigation projects and not for adaptation. The rules for the Article 6 on market and non-market mechanisms was finally agreed after 3 COPs of failure. So now we can see that the Paris Agreement has completed the rule book for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. The Glasgow breakthroughs are important also because they look for further involvement of the private sector in the solution, and there were those promises or pledges in parallel to the convention, and also some major disappointment because the progress is still insufficient, and it is important that we are clear that much more has to be done. Well, now let's. Shirley was talking about the distillation, and we were in Glasgow. Scotland has a lot of experience in distilling, so I thought that we could use this little bit humoristic approach to say, well, what are the main elements of the process in relation to Coronivia? How we can distill the main elements of what happened with Coronivia in Glasgow? Well, what can I tell you about this? Well, first, Coronivia, let's remember that agriculture is the only sector in the convention that has a dedicated agenda item. No other sector, no energy, no transportation, no wastes, no industry, no. Only agriculture has a dedicated agenda item, and the reasons are related to its particular vulnerability, its relation to food security, its importance for livelihoods and the economies of countries, including developing countries. So it has a dedicated agenda item, and it is very important that we use this agenda item to enhance climate action effectively on the ground in the agriculture sector. The discussion on agriculture started in 2009, so some 12 years ago, and there were different workshops, and finally we arrived to COP23 with a decision, and now Coronivia is considered a landmark in the convention, but it took 8 years to achieve a political decision. And I have to say that it was a proposal from Uruguay which unblocked the negotiations, and there were some difficulties related to the balance between mitigation and adaptation. There was no agreement on that. Developing countries want to focus more on adaptation, and developed countries wanted a balance between mitigation and adaptation. Finally, the transactional solution was to speak of adaptation and adaptation co-benefits, and co-benefits include mitigation. So it's somehow elliptic mention to mitigation without saying mitigation. This is how the language of the negotiations go around. So it's sometimes, in order to reach the consensus, you have to be somehow vague. The other problem is that the developing countries wanted to create a program for agriculture in the subsidiary body for implementation to foster implementation at the country level. There was no agreement on that. Finally, the solution proposed by Uruguay was, well, let's create a single, only one program with SAFTA and SBI together, working in the same room with the same negotiators and with the two hats. So let's remember, what does the decision that created Coronivia say? Well, it says that SAFTA and SBI, SAFTA is the subsidiary body for scientific and technical advice, and SBI is subsidiary body for implementation, will jointly address issues related to agriculture, taking into consideration the vulnerabilities of agriculture to climate change and approaches to addressing food security. So here is explicit dimension to food security. And it will develop modalities for implementing the outcomes of the different workshops. Since 2018, a series of workshops were implemented, of modalities for implementation of the outcomes of these workshops you see on the screen: adaptation, early systems, risk and vulnerability assessment, adaptation measures, increased productivity in sustainable manner. Then we had workshop on methods and approaches to assess adaptation, improvement of soil carbon, soil health, fertility, pastures, croplands, and integrated systems, improving nutrient use and manure management, improved management in animal production, socioeconomic and food security dimensions, and finally, an intersessional workshop implemented this year on sustainable use of land and water, and the strategies and modalities to scale up the best practices, innovation, and technologies. And if we look at the topics that are here in the roadmap of Coronivia, you see explicitly that one of the main topics is livestock, and also livestock is here in manure and nutrients, is here in soil health, is here in food security dimensions, socioeconomic. So in fact, livestock is cross-cutting all the topics of Coronivia, and is one of the most relevant topics for our work. Well, Coronivia, how much progress in COP26? What it was expected or less than expected? Well, this image summarizes my conclusion of the progress. It depends, pessimistic or optimistic, but we didn't achieve everything we needed. So there is work for the next months. The main outcomes is that what is important to say is that we didn't go out of negotiations with our empty hands. We made progress. And this progress was related to welcoming the reports on the workshops, recognizing the importance of the topics covered in these workshops, recognizing the importance of scaling up support and creating an enabling environment to mobilize resources for implementation, inviting the constituted bodies and financial entities of the convention to continue to be involved in Coronivia work, and what is our task for the next months: continue consideration of this matter, including a draft text elements on the report on the intersessional workshop, at June 2022, and a draft decision for consideration and adoption by the COP27. And this is in the heart of our work for the coming months, how to agree on a draft decision that starts the second phase of Coronivia in 2023 with a focus on implementation. Well, now going to the end of this presentation and looking towards COP27. Well, we are going in the direction of Egypt in the next months, but there is an important stop in Bonn in June, because there will be 2 weeks with plenty of time to discuss and agree on the pending matters of the Coronivia agenda. And if we made enough progress in June, then it will be more likely that in the COP27 here, this is the venue of the COP, but in the old times of the Egyptian Empire. Now I don't think they're going to use these facilities. So to summarize, for Coronivia, there are 3 key results to achieve in June 22 in Bonn and in COP27. First, clean some brackets in a paragraph that could not be agreed because of lack of time. Second, and the most important, to extract the main points contained in the workshops done so far on agriculture as a basis for designing the future of the second phase of Coronivia and feed a decision by the COP. And finally, present to the COP a draft decision that unlocks implementation in agriculture through the constituted bodies of the convention and the financial entities. So this will not be easy to achieve. It may not be achieved in COP27, but we have to do all our efforts to do it. And as this COP is in Africa, and for Africa, agriculture is a top priority, then this is something that will also help a lot, because the presidency will put a lot of pressure to get concrete results in agriculture in the next COP. Difficulties and challenges ahead. Well, the return of mitigation. During COP26, it was reopened this discussion on adaptation mitigation. There was also a lot of discussion on if putting the focus on agroecology or going for a more general approaches that contemplate agroecology or any approaches that a country would prefer. For sure, new difficulties will always rise. And as I say here, there are stones on our way forward, but we should not wish a road without stones, but we should wish to have the ability to go through our way and trying to sort out these stones. Challenges are to strengthen the dialogue and approach positions to build the necessary consensus. But this will be a process of give and take, because it's in the heart of any negotiation, from buying a car or buying a house to coping with climate change. There is always a process of giving and taking. So the preparatory work process before one is key. And we have to make Coronivia an instrument to support climate action in the countries by creating this enabling environment to provide parties with means of implementation. So I finish here my presentation. I hope there are questions and comments that will be more than welcome. And I hope that I put some clarity on this process. And well, I'm ready for any questions or comments or involvement of you. So Shirley, over to you.
Thank you so much, Walter. That was really very useful for many of us, I'm sure. You put out the opportunity, but you've also stressed very much the challenges as well. So let me at this point invite people to make comments, ask questions, bring suggestions. You can do that by writing in the chat, but also raise your hand and we will unmute the microphone so that you'll be able to speak and we can have a bit of a conversation about that. We have quite some few minutes for that. Barbara, I think you were monitoring the questions, so maybe you could help us. I can see one in my chat, but there may have been some before.
From Rogerio. I don't know if Rogerio would like to ask directly.
No, it's fine. You can read my question, please.
Okay, so Walter, in your opinion, how GASL can contribute to change the negative image of livestock from now to the next COP in Africa?
Easy question, Walter.
Yes, thank you very much, Rogerio. Muito
Sorry
obrigado.
about that.
No. It's a very important question, and I think that it's a long-term process of improving the quantity and the quality of communication, because a lot of damage has been done to livestock, blaming it for being one of the main drivers of climate change, when the fact is that it is not. So why we don't blame enough coal or oil or fossil fuels, and we think that the cow is so responsible, and at the same time it is very important to see the whole picture, to see the many functions of livestock systems in our countries and the relation between ruminants and ecosystem services and maintaining biodiversity and water quality. So we cannot see only livestock from the only limited perspective of climate change. We need to have a more overall assessment of the dimensions in terms of environment benefits, things that we can improve in the relation between livestock and the environment, and of course there are many things we have to improve, but also the social dimensions, the economic dimensions. So we have to I think GASL has an opportunity to continue working on modifying this image, and for this maybe it is necessary to continue elaborating communication elements, papers, or different combination of means of communication in order to put things where they should be. And thanks for the question, but I don't think this can be done in 1 year, but it should be a permanent task to influence the mind of the consumers, which are wrongly biased against livestock.
Thank you very much, Walter. Thank you. And communication, I think, is a key element that Shirley is talking every time. Communication. He's improving that a lot in GASL. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're trying. And of course, there's many other partners and those online as well who also have communication channels. So it's something we can work on across the livestock sector, I'm sure. I can see a hand. Alexandra, I believe. Please go ahead.
Yes, Shirley, thank you. Thank you, Walter, for the presentation and also for leading the process and representing Latin America in all this discussion. I have a very practical question on how the countries will work to achieve the 30% reduction in the methane pledge. I mean, will all the countries contribute on an equal 30% reduction in methane, or countries that have more emissions will have more ambitious targets too? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Your question is very important because this pledge can be misinterpreted. And the 30% is the global target for all countries adhering. So it doesn't mean that all have to contribute with 30. It means that, for example, those countries that have a lot of opportunities to avoid the leaks in the oil and natural gas and coal sector, and these leaks have negative costs that are an opportunity, as I said, are low-hanging fruits, then maybe they don't reduce 30%, they can reduce 70% or 100% of it in that source. We know that for livestock, it's not the case. Livestock is not a low-hanging fruit. It's a high-hanging fruit. So I think that the idea is that every country analyzes and assesses how it can contribute to the global target, and well, do as much as it can. But it doesn't mean that livestock have to reduce 30%, landfills have to reduce 30% in every country, and every country has to reduce 30%. Your question is very important because the pledge can be misunderstood. And the first reaction of many people, and including myself, I said, oh no, 30%, we can't do that. It's impossible. We should decrease our number of cattle by 30% in order to do it. There is no science or technology to reduce, because it's not net reductions. You cannot say, well, I reduce methane by 30% because I have sequestered carbon by the equivalent to 30%. No, it's absolute methane. So your question, Alexander, is very important to clarify that the idea is that is to point to these low-hanging fruits, and there is not a real focus on livestock, but livestock can contribute. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Walter. And also, folks, check in the chat. Andrew's also provided a little bit more background on that the large methane emitting countries agreed to, as Walter just explained, it's a global target. So everything counts. Stephanie, I can see your hand up. Please come in.
Yes, lovely. Thank you. Stephanie Moore from the Humane Society International here. I just had a quick question on the Deforestation Pledge, and I hope you can hear me okay. So as I understand, there are various commodities that are being looked at: coffee, soya, timber, and livestock's just one of them. So I was wondering if you could tell us, in your opinion, kind of how will sort of the key commodities be determined, because these are just kind of examples that have been given so far. And kind of how will the decision be reached among countries on which one of them to prioritize? And especially kind of what role do you see livestock having in the Deforestation Pledge? Thanks.
Stephanie, thanks for your question, because it's very relevant not only to the Deforestation Pledge, but for all the other pledges. And these pledges are beside the Paris Agreement. There is not any legal link with the Paris Agreement, nor a legal link with the NDCs. Parties are not required to include their contributions for these pledges in the NDCs. So how will the progress in achieving these targets we monitor and verify it is not clear. Pledges are pledges. So it's something that you promise, but you may fulfill or may not fulfill. It's something beside the COP and beside the Paris Agreement, and whatever is under the UNFCCC has certain mechanisms to quantify and verify. The global stock take, for example, is one of them for the Paris Agreement. So how is it going to be measured or monitored? It's not clear. It's just an intention. It remarks that it is very important to achieve that target. But as we know, countries have already promised to reduce deforestation, and they have not achieved that target. At the same time, I have, for example, one question. Are we including all deforestation, only illegal deforestation? Well, this is vague. This is not, nobody knows the answer to this question. And we know that deforestation, some deforestation is legal in many countries. But for the atmosphere, when CO2 goes to the atmosphere does not ask CO2. Where are you coming from? Are you coming from legal or illegal deforestation? And is legal, okay, come in. Is illegal? No, you cannot enter here. No, there's not this kind of, of situation. So CO2 is CO2, and no matter where it comes from. So what do we mean by zero deforestation? This is, I don't know, this is one question I personally have. So I think that these pledges are a little bit weak somehow. We cannot rely too much on them, but they are, at least they express that there is the intention to achieve that. And the other problem is the tragedy of the commons, as we know. If 100 leaders promise something, then every one of them will look to the others and say, are they fulfilling this? If they are not, then why should I? So it's all this problem of that is in many environmental issues is the tragedy of the commons. So I don't know, but it is important. It puts the topic in the public opinion. The NGOs will press on that. The governments will feel some compromise to do things. It's better than nothing. The weak point is that this is not legally binding to the Paris Agreement and the Convention. This will be my reflection. Thank you for the question, Stephanie.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Stephanie, for the question. And it's, as Walter says, it's really, to me, it struck me how very visible all these things were at the COP and following the COP. And maybe it's a sort of a role of the social media and the increased engagement globally in these processes that is actually an opportunity, because as Andrew was putting just now in the chat, for the Methane Pledge, if we can show livestock stepping up and really starting to address this, then we also become in the public eye as an area that's trying to really make some progress in these areas. So maybe that opportunity is something that we can also stress. I can see another question in the chat with soil and soil health as a common denominator for livestock. Shouldn't we be talking less of livestock and more of circular farming? Walter, do you want to comment on that?
Well, yes. I think that circularity is also linked to other of the topics of Coronivia, that is nutrients and manure management, and there is embedded the idea of circularity and how circularity can contribute to soil health, and we can optimize the use of nutrients and manure, taking care of organic matter in the soil, fertility, and all the benefits of and importance of soil health. So I think that somehow those topics are very much interlinked. Thank you for the question, Martin.
Thanks. Thanks very much. I'm not seeing any more hands or any more comments at the moment. So let's pose a question for everybody to maybe answer, put your answers in the chat. And the question is, what would you like to see more of? What actions should be taken from or by livestock sector stakeholders in relation to these COP processes that you've heard Walter so nicely describe today? Let me see if I put the question into the chat so you can get it. Let's see if we could get some comments on that as we approach the end of our hour together today. Any thoughts on that? What should we prioritize across the livestock sector to respond to this, as Walter has very well put it, opportunity and challenge? A lot of thinking going on, maybe. Somebody want to go first here? I can
Have a
see Shin has a hand up. Shin?
Thanks, Shirley and Walter. Well, just to be brief and to the point, we're doing quite a lot of work, as you are likely aware, in LEAP on methane. And there will be a report, I understand, which we will see the first draft early next year. So just wanted to be sure everyone would be looking forward to that. And, you know, to we also look forward to your reviews, because when it comes out, we do not expect it to be perfect the first time. The other thing I just wanted to quickly maybe ask a bit of a question. I understood that livestock, actually, in terms of the methane contributions, that methane coming from livestock, once you get past the half-life, so let's say a bit more than a decade, then actually if you had a stable herd, then you're actually decreasing your contribution already. And can that sort of thing be taken into account in the negotiations? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shin. And I see some ideas, suggestions coming in about communication, about shrubs, communication, external facing engagement, making sure that we don't treat all the livestock systems across the world in the same way, more on communication, some synthesis about some of the opportunities, perhaps. Great suggestions, thank you. And I think Barbara's going to put some web addresses into the chat as we draw to a close. I can see just a couple of minutes left and I don't see any more hands at this point. So Walter, would you like to make any final comment?
Yes, Shirley. First of all, that I highly appreciate this opportunity, and I'm very thankful for your time to listen to these inputs, and I hope that it can help strengthen the GASL action in relation to the climate change negotiations. Secondly, is that we expect COP27 to be more focused on agriculture than COP26. And in Latin America, we are discussing some ideas, and maybe this could be also an information useful for GASL. We are talking with Egypt as the presidency to bring again the Agriculture Day that was important in other COPs some time ago, to have a kind of agriculture pavilion and to identify the opportunities to go with information messages to the COP. And I think that as we are all agreeing that increasing communication is very important, then COP27, but also in Bonn during SAPSTA in June, if Omicron lets us meet in person, oh my God. There are also side events in which it is possible to pass messages. So maybe FAO or GASL can consider this. During COP27, there was a very, very interesting, and I think it was the first time I have seen it. It was what it was called the Science Pavilion. This Science Pavilion every day had several presentations from the perspective of science. And there were very interesting presentations there. And I think that also communicating the role of livestock from the science point of view, discussing things as the ones that Singh has said, that, well, if we stabilize methane, we are not further contributing to global warming. If we decrease methane, we are contributing to global, not warming, but global cooling. So these types of things could be discussed in the Science Pavilion. And so I see an opportunity. The other opportunity is that observers can attend the open meetings of Coronibia. And this is an opportunity to pass messages also. FAO is an accredited observer. I don't know if GASL can become an accredited observer and also make an intervention and say something, but these are things that should be maybe taken into account. And so I just wanted to underline that the next COP with the stop in bone will be crucial for agriculture, and that well, then there's a possibility to plan something specifically to enhance the visibility of the messages that GASL can pass to the outside world on the role of livestock. So thank you very much. And of course, after this meeting, I am at your disposition. If you want to have some questions or anything to discuss, just write an email to me and we'll get in touch. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Walter. Fantastic presentation and fielding the questions really, really well. We will follow up as GASL with some more conversation about how we can help the livestock sector progress this sustainability dimension. That's all from me. I'm going to hand back to Eduardo just to close off. Eduardo is the manager for GASL. Eduardo, let me hand over to you to close now.
Thank you very much, Shirley, and to Walter. Really, thanks a lot for preparing such an important presentation in such a short time. We really thought that having this presentation as soon as possible after the COP was very key for us. So thank you, and thank you everybody for being here. There are still some questions popping up, and I maybe would like to give you, Walter, one more minute so that you can refer to this interesting question on CO2 sequestration from pastures as an element to be included formally in the next IPCC report. What would you say, Walter?
Well, yes, the role of soils as a carbon sink has been said to be very relevant, of course. And there is a special report by the IPCC on land. This report is from 2018, and there is a consideration there on the potential for carbon sequestration in soils. And there are other initiatives that also have go more in depth into this issue, as the Global Soil Partnership and others. So carbon sequestration is a very important topic, but at the same time, it's a very difficult topic. So we have to be aware that it's not so easy to achieve significant results in general, and to measure this in a short time, because carbon goes out fast but goes in slow. So it's difficult to see changes in a short time, but there is a significant role. And we should discuss what are the practices that help increase soil carbon. And Coronibia has a specific topic on that, related to carbon sequestration, to soil health, to fertility and nutrient management, manure management, all this connected to soil carbon. So I think that it's a very important topic.
Many thanks, Walter. And regarding the process of becoming an observer, we will keep pursuing that. I think we initiated some years ago, and they allowed us to present information papers. Now we need to keep pursuing the process of becoming an observer. Thank you for that, Walter. For Catherine, that is asking about this presentation, Barbara already shared the link in this chat where you will find the presentation shortly. Barbara, maybe you can share again this link so that anyone who would like to see the presentation can find it there. Many thanks. Have a very
Eduardo,
good
if
rest.
you allow me,
Yes.
to add something,
Yes, please.
we are seeing a very relevant process of work on methane in LEAP. So there are 3 working groups working on methane. So the conclusions of these workshops could be also, I think, I don't know, I propose to ask LEAP when this work is over to present to GASL and to have a discussion on these outcomes, because the work refers to the metrics, which is very relevant for methane. We know that the current metrics over represents the global warming contribution of methane, but most countries don't want to change the metric. And we also know that there are opportunities to influence how much methane is produced in the rumen, and well, I think that this work on the LEAP could be a significant, in my view, a significant contribution to the discussion in GASL, and also to how to incorporate this to the COP27 process.
Yes, thank you for that, Walter. Really important. And my really deep thanks to Shirley, to Barbara, to Lavinia for providing this excellent support in this webinar, and to you, Walter, again, thanks a lot. Have a good rest of the day, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.